Joining us right now, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, also a former congressman. He is now the president and CEO of National Center for Policy Analysis. Thanks so much for joining us, Colonel.
Hey, good morning, Larry and Dan. And yes, I do know how to drive a stick shift, but I have not taught my daughters how to do it yet.
Oh, see, now they're not going to be able to steal cars. There's one career path they can't take.
That's a good thing.
Not that they
You're going to have
would,
to stay
Colonel.
tuned for that story later. Colonel.
Colonel West, we have a lot to talk about. I do want to talk about the developments, though, in Iraq, as ISIS, it appears, is really closing in on some stations where we've got U.S. Marines. Our troops right now are training some Iraqi forces at an air base, an Iraqi air base, and apparently ISIS is now just 5 miles away from that base and even tried to send some suicide bombers to try to thwart that base over the weekend. What is happening there?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's funny that the president would say that ISIS, they're on the defense and the morale is low. They just took a western Anbar province town of al-Baghdadi, which is located 5 miles from the al-Assad base, which is where you have the Iraqi army and about 300 to 320 U.S. Marines that are doing training and advising. So it's very simple what needs to happen, Larry and Dan. You put up an air combat air patrol cap over that area to make sure that ISIS cannot reinforce, they cannot maneuver, they cannot do any type of movements. You bring in an aerial task force, F-22s, A-10s, AV-8B Harriers, and also attack helicopters. And you start to look at how you can go on to a counteroffense and really bring an incredible, horrible defeat to ISIS and then start a greater counteroffensive against ISIS. But it is very interesting. They did try to breach the defenses there with 8 individuals that were in Iraqi army uniforms with suicide belts. They were repelled. But this is a time when we could show leadership. This is a time when we could go on the offense and once again restore the relationship we had with those Sunni tribal leaders that were in Al-Anbar province that helped us during the awakening.
Well, Colonel, I know, having spoken to you on and off the air, you have very strong feelings about leadership. And, you know, our president just seems to be, and listen, I think we can all agree that a lot of this should end at the water's edge, but it's very difficult at this point to get behind our president. I mean, taking selfie stick pictures with BuzzFeed, just clowning around, you know, on the day that Kayla Mueller, the announcement that she was killed by ISIS. It just seems, in light of what's going on with Bibi Netanyahu, al-Sisi, and King Hussein, the president looks even worse.
Well, there is the magical world, the social utopia that Barack Obama wants to believe exists, and then there's the world of reality. It's kind of like in the Matrix, where you had the Matrix world and you had the real world. And I think the president continued to take the red pill and stayed in the Matrix instead of the blue pill. So what I see happening is that we have leaders like King Abdullah of Jordan, General al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, who has struck back against ISIS after they beheaded the 21 Coptic Egyptian Christians, which the president in the White House couldn't even say that they were Christians, you know, just the same as the folks who were killed at the kosher deli in Paris. So it's all of these little things, you know, out there in Palm Springs, California right now playing golf, the selfie stick thing that shows that the president really is not engaged in what is going on. And I better be careful because he may tell me to get off my high horse.
Right, yeah. Who are you to judge, Colonel West? You know, while you're talking about the lack of leadership or pathetic leadership that we're experiencing, I have to say the president of Egypt is really, really standing up for the people of his country and also Christians. If you see, you know, the horrible story of ISIS beheading 21 Egyptian Christians who had been kidnapped in Libya, immediately the president of Egypt overnight sent a bombing raid and airstrikes against those ISIS strongholds in Egypt. No thinking, no wringing hands, no petering back and forth and trying to get international support. What do you make of the changing tide there in the Middle East, and how important is it that Egypt is now jumping on board?
Well, Egypt has always been on board. Egypt has cut off, the tunnels for Hamas, and the difference is this, guys. King Abdullah is a U.S. Special Forces trained, combat pilot. Benjamin Netanyahu was a former IDF airborne commando. General al-Sisi was a military leader who overthrew the Mohammed Morsi Muslim Brotherhood government and gave an incredible speech at the beginning of this year to the clerics there, telling them that they have to stop this violent militant Islamic proselytization. And so General al-Sisi, these were Egyptians. It wasn't about Christian or Muslim. They were Egyptians. And he has already, with the UAE, been running combat airstrikes against the Islamists in Libya. But this is the interesting thing, guys. This is the Libya that our president, and with Hillary Clinton, unconstitutionally committed U.S. resources to, and they turned it over to the Islamists. And we now know about those hidden tapes where Gaddafi's son was even talking to Dennis Kucinich about, this is not necessary. We will transition the leadership and we will leave. So, again, President Obama destabilized the country. An American embassy was closed in Libya, just the same as we see in Yemen. And there is no foreign policy. There is no national security strategy for the United States in the Middle East. And again, the only desert that the president likes seems to be the desert in California where he's playing golf.
Well, Colonel, by the way, thank you for correcting me before I said King Hussein. That's, of course, the father of King Abdullah.
Well, that's why you had me here. That was a test.
Right. Listen, testing you would be a big mistake on my part. But I was listening to some comments on the radio this week from NCTC Director Nick Rasmussen. Very disturbing comments he made about ISIS's attempts maybe in the future here to get non-parochial and to do stage some attacks on U.S. soil. Now, we've known about other groups, AQAP, core Al-Qaeda, as the administration calls them, their capabilities and desires to do that. But is that something on the triaging the potential for attack? Is ISIS, is this something, are they not tied down at home with everything going on there? Are they really looking for this right now?
Oh, of course they are. I mean, these guys are master propagandists, and there are means by which they can use social media and calling for more of these singular jihadist type of attacks like we just saw in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Right.
But it has already happened here. Nadal Hassan happened here. Just up the road from where I am here in Dallas, Texas, in Moore, Oklahoma, we had the woman that was beheaded. And we still try to, excuse these things.
That was a disgruntled that was a disgruntled employee who had a problem with HR. That's what we were told.
That's what we were told.
Yeah.
And so these things are happening, but when you have a president that cannot even say the word Islamic terrorism, when he tries to bring up the Crusades as an excuse or a sense of moral equivalency, this is medieval, what we are watching. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go, total war against these guys. That's the only thing they understand.
Colonel West, I would really love a quick take here as a former member of Congress. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus have all sort of linked arms, and they are boycotting the speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu. They are sort of throwing the race into this, saying, don't disrespect our president here. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I find it despicable and disgusting. I was a former member of the Congressional Black Caucus, but, to have John Lewis, the great civil rights icon, stand up and take this position, there were Jewish Americans that came to the support and the defense of blacks during the civil rights movement. If you go back and remember, there were 2 Jewish young men that were killed in Mississippi when they were down helping out with voting rights movement. The Congressional Black Caucus is totally on the wrong side of this, and I would hope that somehow they would find their moral courage and not do this, but I believe that the strings are being pulled coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania.
Yeah, for sure. Colonel West, thank you so much for joining us, as always, sir.
Thanks, Colonel.
Man who saw
Thanks,
a lot.
Guys. Take care, Larry, Dan.
Sure.
See ya.
Man who saw a lot of blood spilled over in those areas now, American blood, to win those territories for Iraq, and now you see it all falling into ISIS hands.